Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. In our episode today, York Dore joins us again. We will talk Vanderbilt baseball as the Commodores prepare for the Nashville Regional. Our show, as always, is presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House. Those guys turn coffee into water and have a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news today brought to you by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, Vanderbilt basketball gets a commitment for 2019. Otan Jankovic is in the class now. He's a three-star forward. He's about 6'9", 6'10", from Montverde Academy in Florida. That, of course, the school that produced Steve Chingang in the Kevin Stallings era. Our guest line today brought to you by Boll & Branch. That is a company founded by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. They're amazing. They are fair trade certified, which means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them, but I promise you, you will not want to. I've slept on these for years. You're going to love them just as I do. If you have the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to Boll & Branch. That's BOLL and branch.com. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. York Dore joins us now after a busy couple of weeks. And like I told you, my friend, I appreciate you joining me. I know you are really busy in your personal life when you have no time to talk baseball, because baseball is pretty important to you.
It is, and it's something that brings joy to a lot of Vanderbilt fans, in large part because we've got a coach who runs a program the right way and who teaches kids how to play the right way, and sometimes karma feels pretty good, and Vanderbilt's having a type of season where even the warts get covered over pretty quickly by having a team that can beat you in so many ways, whether it's the good pitching like we saw from Drake Fellows facing Ethan Small of Mississippi State, the pure bludgeoning that we saw in the quick dispatches in the first and third games we played in Hoover, or the you think you got us down, but oh no, pulling a Britney Spears "Whoops, I Did It Again" type of comeback victory like we saw in the final. And Vanderbilt did it with the good pitching at times, with dominant hitting, with the exception of when they were facing Small. And kudos to Julian Infante for getting the big hit in that game. And then they also did it with defense. And, the guy who really shined defensively this week was Harrison Ray, who, that personally I've been critical to you of both Harrison and Austin not having a good instinct for the position or that they were playing earlier in the year. And the two of them have both just advanced so much over the course of the season, and having a sense for how to play third in the case of Austin or how to play second in the case of Harrison. It's not always perfect. We saw Austin make a couple of foul pop plays a little harder than they perhaps needed to be on in the finale, and Harrison, one of these days, someone's going to convince him to always be covering second on a ball to the left side of the infield. But the two of them just continue to be outstanding defenders, and Harrison in particular really was fantastic going to his left this week in Hoover, which was not he was, I think, early in the year, he had a knack for going to his right on balls up the middle and really fielded that well, but hadn't yet mastered getting the good jump and getting the play in to his left. And he's come so far in that. We've seen that really over the last 3-4 weeks of the season. It also doesn't hurt that he's tearing the cover off the ball right now.
I want to circle back to Harrison later because we had a podcast question from a listener on him, and he has really been good the last month, I think. But Let's go back to the body of work as a whole. Vanderbilt was the first team to win the conference tournament and the regular season since the 2017 did it, which I didn't really realize till I think they made that announcement. You would have thought that one team would have taken both. I know that some of the elite teams go into that event thinking that, okay, we don't need to do much down here, which, by the way, the selection committee, I think, put a cold shower on that notion this year in the way that it treated the tournaments. That's another subject. But point is, like, you have some teams like LSU in particular that do play that event pretty hard. Florida, another one, that have won some regular season championships. To be the first team to do that in 12 years is pretty special. I know that 2007 team holds a special place in people's hearts. And I know the notion of David Price as your Friday starter that's one thing where that team had it on this team in a big way. But I compare the numbers and look at the run differentials in SEC play. To me, this team is clearly better than that one, and that's a big statement.
Yeah, and I think what we have to remember is everything's always got to be on a relative basis. So we're sort of pulling our hair out over the walks and not having necessarily the ability to go, 11 deep on a pitching staff and expect a kid to be able to get guys out and or throw strikes consistently. And I think maybe, some of this is adapting to standards that are unrealistic and that are set by teams like 2007, 2011, 2013, 2015, where you just had such a deep roster that of folks who could get it done on the hill, and such outstanding defenders that you don't necessarily sit back and look at, just how good this squad is in the different ways it can beat you. Now, let's first start with, we have never at Vanderbilt seen an offense like this, and this is BB Core era. I think Chris Mahaffey posted that since the BB Core era had begun, JJ Bleday's year is, I think, fourth or fifth best for home runs. Which is in and of itself a remarkable stat, but he's just one of many. You've got at the top of the lineup 2 Golden Spikes candidates. You've got Mr. Summer, Stephen Scott. You've got professional hitter Phil Clark. You've got Pat DeMarco turning on, as we said he eventually would when he got back from his injury. You've got Ethan Paul leading the SEC in RBIs, finally having that all SEC type season, although the SEC voters didn't agree with that, which is a snub. But that I do want to take a moment to address. It was a close call between him and Casey Martin of Arkansas, but really the only statistic that Casey Martin of Arkansas had over Ethan was home runs. And to me, it's inexcusable that Paul was not the second team all SEC shortstop. Greg Kessler from Ole Miss, I think, deserved to be first team and was, and played a heck of a tournament as well. But I feel pretty bad that Ethan Paul didn't get the recognition that he deserves based on his offense, his defense, and his run production this year. He deserved to be second team all SEC shortstop, and he's really delivered on his senior swan song. But up and down this lineup, you've just got so much talent and so much power when you've got, in the 9-hole, a guy who can hit a ball 450 feet and actually has pretty darn good plate discipline for a guy hitting 220 who hit 190 a year ago. I mean, Julian's getting on base. He's got 8 homers. He's got like 36 RBI or something like that, which is, if you look at it, probably better than any other 9-hole hitter in the SEC. Average might not be the best, but the run production probably is, and the on-base average isn't too shabby. You've got Harrison Ray, who hasn't met a fastball that he didn't love, and I don't think the fastballs loved him back. Why anyone throws him anything but a slider down and away is a mystery to me. But he's really been a fantastic piece, especially in the second half of the season, offensively and defensively. The lineup just goes up and down, round and round. Ty Duvall, all he does is rake. the production numbers haven't always been the best because he tends to hit into some tough luck, but had some huge swings over the last couple of weeks and really solidified that DH spot to the extent that Drake Fellows, Kumar Rocker, and Pat Raby don't get as many starts as they used to.
Lots of things to chew on there. The shortstop thing, I can forgive the voters for that one. I have researched this pretty thoroughly. There were 6 shortstops who had, for a lot of seasons, all SEC caliber years. They're Jordan Westberg of Mississippi State, Josh Smith of LSU, who, by the way, I watched him a lot at the SEC tournament. Really liked that kid's game. Brady McConnell of Florida, Casey Martin of Arkansas, Ethan Paul, and Gray Kessinger of Ole Miss. I think Kessinger had to be your first team guy because he's so good in the field when I've seen him. And I think he led the SEC maybe in on-base percentage in league games or in hitting, one of the two. He was very good in league games.
In league.
Yeah,
he 400 in league.
That one I give that to him. I think Smith had a slightly better year than Ethan did. McConnell and Martin had gaudy home run numbers. Both of them, especially Martin, really talented, but defense was a wreck at times. Same thing with McConnell. And Westberg was good, but not as good as those. I think Paul deserved to be in the top 3. I don't know that I'd go much further than that, but it was close. I think he was a victim of being in a good shortstop crop. Back to the offense on a whole for a moment, though. They averaged 8.93 runs per 27 outs, which I like to look at that rather than runs per game, because a lot of times when you're winning a bunch of home games like they did, you don't bat in the 9th inning, so that counts against you. That's 1/9 of your production that's missing there. So when you adjust it for that, they scored almost right at a run per inning. I think an elite offense is somewhere probably over 7 in my mind. This is the best offense they've ever had by far, but I think people understand that. I just don't think that they understand the margin by which it's been better than other teams. And I'm going to look at this while we're doing this. The other great offenses I can think of, the 13 offense was really good. Now, granted, some of this is adjusted for, has to be adjusted for era. 2013, that offense scored 7.2 runs a game. The 2011 offense, which was also elite, average per 27 outs, 7.25. The 2007 offense was, I know it wasn't that good either, but it was, I think, somewhere in that range. They averaged, 7.45 per 9 or for 9 innings, 27 outs. You would say all 3 of those teams were elite offenses. This one scored a run and a half more than any of those. That is amazing.
And it didn't escape the elite pitchers in the SEC. I mean, they faced everyone, they faced everyone, and they performed. They didn't always necessarily light up the opposition. Like, for example, didn't light up Small. You didn't light up.
Not Lacey. The other Christian Roa got to them, and all the Georgia guys pitched him pretty. But that's a great point. I think they literally faced every single good pitcher in the league, and furthermore, I think they had the number 6 strength of schedule nationally. I know that's better than some of the other teams 5. I listed. 5. Okay,
number 5.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the other teams in the top 10 of all these categories that Vanderbilt leads the way on in offensive stats, none of them are facing gaudy strength of schedules. Probably if I had to guess, and I'm looking it up now, Mississippi State had the 18th ranked strength of schedule. If I had to guess, of the other teams that are at the top of the national rankings in offensive categories, they're probably the one that faced the next toughest strength of schedule. So this is a really, really impressive offense. And then when you look at it, and I think you can excuse some of or explain, I should say, rather than excuse, some of the defensive prowess on the idea that that Vanderbilt does play on true turf and gets good hops, but relative to past years, even last year with Connor Kaiser anchoring down at short, this defense has been right there, and it's been outstanding. And on the pitching mound, yes, there are crises of confidence that we've had with just about everyone on the staff, with the exception of Tyler Brown, at some point or another this year. But you look up and down, and Drake Fellows is the first in the country to 11-0. Pat Raby had a dreadful performance on Sunday, but he's still 9-1 with an ERA of like 2.5, 2.7, something like that. Kumar Rocker has rebounded from a rather miserable debut to have a all freshman type of rookie year. And Mason Hickman has quietly been doing Walker Buehler things without the 97 mile an hour fastball, but still doing Walker Buehler things in the midweek, 7-0 at 2.22 ERA or something like that. Hugh Fisher, is basically Pennywise the Clown in the dreams of left-handed hitters. Zach King is on and off and whatnot, but Ethan Smith has impressed at times and really, really has a very, very live arm. There's a lot of solid, if inconsistent, performance in the pitching staff, and the numbers themselves are still pretty darn great. I mean, yeah, it's an team ERA, I think, over 4 or approaching 4, but if you look at sort of the national par level, that's okay. And there have been a lot of garbage inning runs scored against the Vanderbilt staff this year as well.
I want to go back to hitting for a minute. They have 4 guys on the team that I think are very good offensive players. Now, you might say they're generating good numbers over sample size, and maybe the matchups have been picked in terms of what's a good matchup, lefty-righty. So I get that, but Isaiah Thomas, it is clear, I think, to everyone, that kid's an elite talent. He's got a lot of swing and miss to his game. He doesn't walk a lot, but he's got monster power. He's going to be an outstanding player. I think Jason Gonzalez really showed great signs as a hitter when he got to play. Cooper Davis was an outstanding leadoff guy, walks 1.3 times per every time he strikes out, which is really hard to do and super fast. And then they've got Walker Crisanti, who's an interesting player. He's had an odd career, but he's been productive more often than not, even sorting through all the weirdness of it. I want to ask you something. Those are 4 bats that would play on just about any other team. I don't know that they've ever had a year where they had one player that sat the bench that was as good as any of those 4. Can you name one?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, not a situation where the lineup has locked itself down to the point that you don't even platoon at all. And I know we saw, Corbs try to catch lightning in a bottle by putting Zeke Thomas in against Ethan Small. And, Ethan Small first off was actually a Vanderbilt commit for a couple months at the end of his junior year of high school. I don't think anyone knows the story on what happened there, whether or not he felt he was recruited over. He was not as highly regarded, at least by some of the national press, as he is now. And but he ended up decommitting and going to Mississippi State. That is a fun, talented kid to watch. What he does with his leg kicks. If Ethan Smith gets anywhere even close to being able to throw hitters off balance like Small does, I'll be thrilled. And he pitches with precision. His stuff plays up. I think he's a 91, 93 guy normally. He may be a little bit tired because he was more 87 to 90 on Saturday when we played. But he was just really, really, really fun to watch. And I could understand why Corbs was reticent to necessarily not try and put a right-handed bat in against him. But Ethan Small really just toyed with a couple of guys in the lineup when he got him down 0-2. And one of those guys, unfortunately, was Isaiah. And it was fun to watch. But to see... and part of it is, though, that the lefty bats in Vanderbilt's lineup generally do hit lefties, so there aren't as many opportunities to get a pinch hit or to get a spot start or to even try and force yourself into a platoon. I think it goes beyond just Isaiah and Jason and Walker and pardon me, I'm forgetting the fourth you mentioned, Chris.
Cooper Davis?
Cooper, of course. Cooper, who would have remained, I would imagine, a starter throughout the year because he was really, really magnetic. But for his injury, he reminds me of Tony Kemp. I can't wait to see him at the top of the lineup next year, hidden in front of Amar. And he's really talented and really fun. I think the injury that he suffered, he had a little bit of Wally Pip going on with Dooley taking over the DH role. I would not be surprised if he's fully healthy to see him get some time in the run to Omaha, but I wouldn't necessarily expect him to start. But he can do a lot of things with his legs. He can do a lot of things with his bunts. He's just a tremendously fun player to watch. But there are also other guys in this lineup, on this bench rather, who would have seen playing time. And it's important and to note and fun to see, especially during the celebration on Sunday, just how amped up some of those kids were. And that's guys like, Dom Keegan, who would have been seeing plate appearances on, not starting, but seeing plate appearances on most Vandy teams as a second or third catcher in the past. It's a really, really talented right-handed bat who's going to see a decent amount of time next year, particularly if neither Phil nor Ty Duvall return for another year. Jahan Malloy, who actually was the first freshman, I think, to get a start this year. I think he DH'd in the opening game or the second game. And a really, really talented kid. And you could just see how animated and excited he was in Coach Corbin's greeting line at the end of the celebration on Sunday, or after the dog pile on Sunday. And it's really fun to see how amped and how staying within themselves and maintaining humility that we've seen from some of the freshmen who basically, Coach Corbin was pretty open about it right from the start of the year, is that there are a lot of young kids in this roster who are just going to have to learn to wait their turn because they're going to have a really hard time, knocking some of the upperclassmen off the field. And at Vanderbilt, they say that every position is rented, none's owned, but that was a pretty airtight lease on some of these positions this year.
Yeah, I think that they've been rent to own this year, and I think the ownership portion has come into play in the last few weeks. Hey, I want to ask you, because we've got maybe 20 minutes left, and we've got a mailbag with some good questions to cover. Give me your quick thoughts on Vanderbilt's regional pairing.
Yeah, I have a hard time being upset with it. Like, you look at the numbers, and it's right about what you'd expect. Indiana State is a very good team. I know that Mason Hickman handled them pretty easily back on April 16th. We won 7-1. We've played them, I think, several years in a row now, so there's familiarity there. Some may remember them as being most notable for having that old left-handed reliever named Ezekiel Entbeard, who had one of the most fantastic bits of facial hair you've ever seen. His name was not actually Ezekiel Entbeard, but I refused to actually look up what it was.
We don't need research for this podcast. No
research. No. Well, he should be named Ezekiel Entbeard.
It plays right.
It does, and that was an epic. If you go back on my Twitter timeline, you'll see that photo of that screen cap of that guy probably like 4 or 5 times in it. You'll have to do quite a bit of searching though. But I think if I Googled VU Hawk Talk and Entbeard, it would come up. But back on April 16th, 7-1 final, we pounded out 14 hits, including getting to them early. I think we faced 5 or 6 pitchers. Hickman and Franklin combined on a 3-hitter, giving up just 1 run. And it, was a pretty convincing win, but Indiana State is a really convincing opponent. I mean, they're no joke. They're 41-16. Did not have a whole lot of Q1 wins because their strength of schedule was 104. But if anything, that just increases the uncertainty when a team has to face them. It's a solid squad. They did not play well on the road. They were only 16-13 on the road, but were 15-2 at home and 10-1 on neutral sites. And that's the one where the number which sticks out quite a bit. and they're coming in hot. 7-3 in their last 10, 4-game winning streak, won their conference tournament. In the pod, all four teams were automatic qualifiers, which means all 4 teams won their conference tournament. I don't know a lot about McNeese State. On Ohio State, they're coming in theoretically hot. I'm certainly not overconfident about winning anything ever, because you never know what can go wrong and you can get Michiganed. But, Ohio State has a very talented redshirt freshman starter who has struck out something like 122 in 80 innings or something like that. Freshman lefty, I think his name's Lonsdale or something like that. Walks a lot of guys. And, maybe it's me and the fact that we've seen like 7 elite, awesome lefties this year and beaten most of them, that I just don't get that scared by that. And I just sort of trust in our offense that we can take care of business. Ohio State's got a couple of good bats in their lineup, but there's nothing in their body of work that screams to me that, whether it's Mason Hickman or Drake Fellows taking the ball on Friday night, that they shouldn't be able to take care of business backstopped by an offense that, that Teddy Cahill said isn't a freight train. It's actually a battleship. And that's pretty much where I sit with it. There are some interesting players to watch in the regional, not on Vanderbilt. Lonsdale would be one of them. And maybe we'll see Ezekiel and Beard in the stands.
We can only hope. Yeah, the Ohio State matchup, I dug in a little bit more on that today. Their offense really doesn't concern me from a Vanderbilt perspective. And I say this over and over. I don't know that, for some reason, I tend to take this part of it, put more stock into it than most people. But I looked them up. They've got 4 pretty good arms. They've got, I guess, 3 of them will start, and they've got one of these rubber-armed long relievers who can go a while. My concern, and again, this is like, okay, you can run outside during a thunderstorm holding a 9-iron to the sky, and chances are nothing's going to happen. But if you go back and something does happen, you look at it, you say, that was right there in front of us, that it could have been disastrous. And I look at this thing the same way. This Lonsway kid has been great lately. You take out the first 4 appearances of his year, and his ERA has been well under 3. Now, he does walk a lot of guys, but he doesn't give up home runs, and he strikes out, I think, 13 guys per 9 innings, which is an elite strikeout rate. You could say, well, they played the Big Ten, and Big Ten hitters aren't SEC hitters. That's true, but there's also a degree when you've got an elite guy on the mound, even elite hitters a lot of times struggle with that. I think that Vanderbilt's going to win that matchup. I think that Vanderbilt's going to roll through this regional, but there's part of me that says, look, the one thing that has stopped them all year, it's not lefties, it's great arms. It's Emerson Hancock. It is Christian Roa having a career day. It is Ethan Small being Ethan Small. The times that they have had hiccups, like the 10% of the time, it's been against those kind of guys, and this may be a time where they catch lightning in a bottle. He comes out, he's got his stuff, he's got his command. I just think that is at least on the radar of the possibility. Now, am I making a prediction? No. Again, I think that they beat Ohio State, win the regional, probably get through it undefeated, but I just think that is one thing that's nagging at me a little bit. Is I think you look at that, and that is the recipe to beat them right there.
Well, that, and also, you will not beat Vanderbilt unless they take their first loss on Friday or Saturday, because Vanderbilt has exactly enough pitching to dominate you for 4 games. If you go into a fifth game in 3 or 4 days, I guess it'd be 4 days. If you force a Monday championship game, then Vanderbilt might not be in ideal shape, because you don't necessarily know what you're getting at the back of the pen. That's one of the reasons why I'm reasonably confident we're going to see Mason Hickman start on Friday, because I think Mason Hickman can come back on Monday and give you something a lot quicker or a lot more likely than you can see Drake Fellows do that. And to be frank, I'm not convinced Mason Hickman isn't the best pitcher on the staff right now. So, if I'm Corbs, and I understand that in each year since 2011, we've started our Friday night starter in game 1 of a regional, I would not do that this year. I would start Mason Hickman, go Drake Fellows game 2, Kumar Rocker game 3, Pat Raby if we have a game 4, and then hands in the air for game 5 if it comes to that. And the way it works, just for those that don't know, double elimination tournament. If you win your first 2 games, the maximum number of games you can play is 4. If you lose one of your first 2 games, the maximum number of games you can play is 5. And that's the nature of how teams get knocked out.
Okay, you're the first person that is given that take. I get why you would say that, and I agree with you. And I will give you supporting data, and I want to circle back to you with your question once I'm done with this. Okay, here are their 4 starting pitchers. I'm going to go best to worst. ERA, Hickman, 220. Raby, 290. Fellows, 405. Rocker, 414. Component ERA, which is kind of taking the luck out of timely hitting and stuff in there. This is how they rank. Hickman, 190. Rocker, 317. Raby, 393. Fellows, 394. Strikeout percentage is the percentage of times you strike out batters. This is the most shocking part to me. Hickman, 33%. Fellows, 27%. And then you go Raby and Rocker, 23 each. Free pass percentage, which is hit batsmen and walks. It goes Rocker 7%, Hickman 8%, Fellows 13%, and Raby 14%. And then home runs. It is Rocker 0.7%, Raby 0.9, Hickman 1.4, Fellows 1.8. That's percentage of the times that those outcomes happen. By the way, the home run rate's really good for all those 4 pitchers and for the staff elite. So I think that everything says Hickman is their best pitcher, and I think at some point you got to back out and say, okay, we got to let common sense prevail. If we got 4 starters and he's our best, it's not, the question is not what do we do with such and such. It's we got to get him in here, and how do we do it? It's not should we. Now, I'm interested in your take on this because I agree with you. That's what I would do too. I don't know that I'd pitch him first, but I'd at least pitch him second or third. My question is, why do you think Tim Corbin will do that? Because that has been opposite of everything he's ever done.
Because Tim Corbin will listen to this podcast, and I will make one final appeal that if you are in a scenario where you need to go 5 innings, or rather 5 games, and you've got a Michigan 2007, you're going to need someone who can give you some innings. And I don't think any starter on the staff's coming back, and Scott Brown and Tim Corbin are going to ask someone to go 7. But you can bring back Mason Hickman on Monday, and he'll give you 3-4 innings of strength. And in addition to that, he will beat Ohio State, and he will give you a long, deep performance so that you have a virtually full stocked pitching staff to bludgeon the opposition to death on Saturday and Sunday with a variety of arms. I have extreme confidence in the other 3 members of the staff. I don't think any of them are coming back on Monday. I don't think Tim Corbin is pitching. First opening starter is either going to be Drake Fellows or Mason Hickman. That's clear. And I don't see Tim Corbin asking Drake Fellows to go on 2-3 days rest on day 1 of the 2019 Major League Baseball draft. I just don't see that happening. It's not something that Drake has had to do in his career. Mason has in the past come back and provided relief appearances after doing a not extended start necessarily, but a start. And beyond that, of all 4 pitchers in the rotation, Mason is the only one who pitches really with an economy of pitches and who can give you 7 innings and only throw 90 pitches, and therefore have the ability to come back 2 days later, 3 days later.
Okay, one more stat I forgot to put out there. This may be the most important. Base runners per innings pitched. Hickman 1.02, Rocker 1.31, Fellows 1.48, and Raby 1.54. But I want to ask you one more thing, because there is a little bit of a problem with your scenario. Okay, they moved Rocker from Game 3 to Game 2 ostensibly. The theory was, I don't know if this is true or not, and maybe it's not, because then you don't put him in the position of having to pitch the deciding game. The two spots a little bit more low pressure situation. So then do you if you're going to pitch Hickman on Friday, does that mean you bump Fellows to 3 and you leave Rocker in the 2? What do you do there?
No, you go. This is big boy baseball time. You have, and beyond that, if you win game 1 and you win game 2, then there's no pressure in game 3. If you lose either of the first 2 games, everything is pressure anyway. So to me, there's no difference. Unless you're going to say you're going to put Kumar in game 1, which you're not going to do, then there's no hiding. And I think Kumar's a big boy. He's pitched real well of late, and he's mature enough to handle and rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I'm just not sure it'll play out that way. I think you've given a lot of people something to chew on there. So
my prediction may not end up being accurate, but it is right.
It's more important to be right about stuff. So
yeah.
Okay, our mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, or landlord insurance, life, or commercial insurance? Call Josh 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD He's my insurance agent, has done some great things for me. Josh is a super guy. Give him a call. You have nothing to lose. Josh can either get you a better insurance deal, or at the worst case thing, you met a really cool guy and a Vandy fan to boot. So first question, Mr. Vandy had asked about Hickman or Raby as the third starter. We've answered that one. I want to go to VU Matt 23. He says, why is Harry Ray playing so well right now? That kid has really been a different ball player the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people come into their own. And, I don't think I was one of the folks who was necessarily in support of the idea of Harry Ray as a second baseman earlier in the year, although I acknowledge that we're sort of in a situation where we didn't know who could play there. I think I was pushing for Stephen Scott without really knowing whether or not that was really something that could reasonably happen. Corbin knows his team, knows it well, knows the buttons to push, and I think he put Harry in a situation where he could succeed, and Harry's taken the bull by the horns and just really dominated. I think he has done a better job of capitalizing on his pitches when he gets them, and that's reflected by, I think it's something like outrageous, like 10 doubles in his last 12 games or something like that was referenced on the broadcast yesterday, or rather 2 days ago. So he's really he's hitting for average and hitting for a little more ISO power. And the defense, though, has really just been fantastic. He's been great at throwing all year long, but didn't necessarily have the instincts for how to break on a ball the first few weeks he was playing second, but it's really come along. And he was playing great defense this weekend on, it should be noted, on a true dirt and grass field, not just on the Vanderbilt turf. So just kudos to Harry. Couldn't be happier for him. It'll be interesting. He's one of those kids where I really don't have a good sense as to what to expect for him next week during the draft. And it's going to be interesting to see, if he gets his name called in a position where he'd forego his senior year.
The thing that's interesting to me, and credit Mike Baxter for this, he was swinging at so many bad pitches out of the zone early in the year. Now, he will still chase some from time to time, but he has improved just remarkably in that regard just in the last month.
Yeah, it has been a lot of better plate discipline, although, again, I continue to think that the real key point here is his success in capitalizing on the mistake pitches when he gets them. And that was really also, sort of what made Julian such a great player as a sophomore is he would foul off the pitcher's pitches or lay off of them, and then he'd punish the mistakes. And with Harry, that's again where he's getting to. I think a little bit more of it as this season winds down.
Yeah, and I think, too, they kind of go hand in hand because as you get in hitters' counts, which you do by laying off bad pitches, that's when pitchers tend to make more mistakes. So it's tending to compound itself. At least that's the way I'm seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go to the next one. And you and I debated talking about the draft. I've said we'll probably have to do this another time because I thought we'd run out of time, which we have. So you and I will have a draft podcast or two between now and the draft, but we do have a couple questions from Bryce Drew Lover and Dan B. Nash. Basically, they want to know, is it a good sign that guys, their commits are not appearing in first-round mocks as much anymore? Anthony Volpe is the one who I think still shows up in some, but I don't think anybody else is. They basically want to know your thoughts on how many of those guys they get to campus.
And that's the magic question, and it's hard to say with specificity what the risk is in this class, because there's been a lot of variance, and it's not necessarily as deep of a college arm class as we're used to seeing over the last few years, which means that teams going after pitching may have to go after, some high school arms a little bit more aggressively. And when you look at the guys in the class right now that you sort of have a natural inclination to be worried about among the arms, you've got Jack Leiter and Kendall Williams as the first two primary ones to think about. Both are first-round potential picks. Jack Leiter, there was an article, I think, just yesterday about his dad, Al, and he is thought to be the toughest sign among the people in the draft this year, with a very, very high number. But that does not mean that someone will not, in fact, pull it off. So he's a kid where, if he's not picked in the top half or top 2/3 of the first round, and he doesn't get picked by the Diamondbacks after that, you can start to feel a little good about as day one wraps up. Kendall Williams, a big armed kid from Mississippi, 6'6" kid, and he's been connected to the first round in a few mocks, but not really someone who's seen as decidedly in the first round, but he's another one to watch. There's the big lefty out of California, Spencer Jones. Spencer is a kid who got injured in his senior year. He's a two-way guy, likely would be a two-way guy as a first baseman and a pitcher at Vanderbilt. He's that good and could be drafted in either case. But he sort of collapsed down out of the first round post-injury, even though he's back and relatively healthy right now. He, I think, is going to get through. And if he does, a potential impact guy, a guy who could be like an AJ Puck, throws like 93, 94 with a big breaker. On top of that, again, a kid who has a real potential power bat, not connected by anyone in the first round, but you got to keep an eye on because he's that kind of talent. And then you've got Wesley Scott out of California, also actually pulled himself out of the draft. There is a process to remove yourself from the draft formally, in which case you can't be picked. And our understanding is that Wesley Scott has actually gone through with that process. He's a 6'1" righty, big power arm, was, I believe, a perfect game All-American, or at least an Under Armour All-American. So that was a big coup. Then the position players who you theoretically might see in the first round, and again, none of them are actually expected to get picked in the first round, but you got Trey Fletcher, who's the kid out of Portland, Maine, who reclassified from junior year of high school to be a senior and entered himself into the draft. He is, on some draft boards as a just a tremendous raw tools type of guy, but not clear that he'll make it into the draft. You've got Anthony Volpe, who's, I think, the kid who everyone is sort of the most excited about as potentially the most important kid in the draft class. He's sort of a do-everything except for hit home runs shortstop, considered to have the best hands in this draft class, a real plus bat from a hit tool perspective, and sort of an all-American leadership personality and characteristic. Oh, and also happens to be high school teammates with Jack Leiter. Interestingly enough, in that article about Al Leiter, I also learned one of their other teammates is Chris Christie's son. So, they're I'm guessing he's a bridge reliever. You got Tyler McKenzie, who's Tristan McKenzie's younger brother, a toolsy kid, but not someone who necessarily has been connected to the first round. And then Carter Young, who's the great Team USA middle infielder from Washington, who really feels strongly that we're going to get through the draft. A kid who can hit for gap power and could compete immediately to start up the middle, and you don't have to worry about his defense. Those are kind of the kids who you have to worry about on the first round side. That's not to say, I've gone through 8 kids there. That's not to say that the other 10 kids in the class aren't extremely talented and extremely important. In particular, there are 3 kids who are coming in who can catch: Max Romero, CJ Rodriguez, and Chris McIlvaine, who's the old mini VandyBoy, Nashville South League World Series team, who's also projected out as a third baseman, shortstop, or right fielder, and potentially even a right-handed pitcher, but currently listed as a catcher in some of the recruiting databases. All 3 of those guys will be really big and key. Michael Doolin is a guy who's going to come in, and I would be very surprised if he isn't an impact arm on the hill, known as having some of the best control in this draft class, which will be a very, very welcome departure from some of the wildness we've seen out of the bullpen. I could go on, but that's sort of where you look at it in the first round. I think that if we do get some defections, and maybe it's going to be 1 or 2 in the first round, and then a couple in later rounds that you weren't necessarily able to predict right off the bat, but just kids who were ready to go.
Is Volpe the biggest worry at this point? That's what I have sensed.
Jack Leiter's kind of like Kumar Rocker. And, Kumar's 6'4", 6'5", 250, and Jack's 6'1", 195. But, they're both sort of imposing draft characters in that, they're top of the draft talents, but that they have very strong commitments. If you get Jack through, it's all gravy. Like, you can't have expected that based on him being a top 10, top 15 type of kid. You don't get those kids through the draft in most circumstances, particularly not when they have both the stuff and the polish, which, if you recall, I think, was it 2, 3, 4 weeks ago on the pod, we talked about the difficulty when you're recruiting this level of talent. You're not usually getting talent that's polished and controlled. And Jack's that kind of kid, even more so than Kumar's. Kumar's better stuff. I mean, Jack has 3+ pitches, or at least average plus pitches, but he has a level of command and control and sort of savvy that comes from having a Hall of Fame dad, or at least a 19-year veteran dad. I don't think Al's actually in the Hall. But Volpe's a guy who's sort of in that range where, okay, he's a shortstop, he's 5'11", doesn't hit for power, but does everything else grade A. Does the lack of power in today's environment depress his draft stock? Undoubtedly. So you start dreaming on it. And, you can foresee the need to have an immediate impact guy at shortstop. And, there are other options within this draft class. I mean, there's Carter Young could be a shortstop or a second baseman, probably preferred at second. Nicky Maldonado, another New Jersey kid, is a top 150 type of recruit, and will, hopefully plug in to being a competitor for a middle infield or third base spot immediately. You've got a couple guys on the current roster who could move in there. Not impossible to imagine Jason Gonzalez trying to get some reps at shortstop. Tate Colwick, Sterling Hayes, Cam McMillan are all guys who are going to get a look in the fall. But, Volpe, if he gets to campus, again, everyone rents a position, and you gotta bid to get that first lease. But you would have an expectation that a guy who was the best defender on Team USA and hit third in the Team USA U18 lineup with, Bobby Witt hitting fifth. That to me sounds like a real impact recruit.
Gut feeling, when the dust is settled on this class and everyone is either committed to come to campus or sign with the team and the deadline is passed, where does this class rank in the country? Where does this class rank among past Vanderbilt classes?
So, there's two ways to look, and I kind of like that D1 does this. I think BA used to do it when Aaron was there. They do a 5-year look back at their recruiting rankings and say, who had the impact, or maybe a 10-year look back, and also see some pro results there. But I think it was a 4 or 5 year look back. You can say who's got the best. You can say which class is the best on the day after the draft ends, on the day after fall practice ends, or on the day after graduation for the last standing senior in the class ends, and you would likely have 3 different results for those different analyses. It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Right.
There have been some great classes.
I will let you think on that one, and I will demand an answer the next time we do this.
All right.
I won't let you get away this easily. Okay, last question, and it's the most important one. Big Hatchie says, when your boy turns 3, is he going to enter the draft, or is he going to hang around till after pre-K or kindergarten?
Yeah, I've told him the importance of nursery school, and that pre-K is that's just prepping you for pre-K, and pre-K is what gets you into the big time. And, to be honest, if you want to get to AAA, you got to get your ABCs in. So I think he'll be tempered with his expectations. He is amphibious, as Charles Shackelford would say, in that he uses both hands with great acuity. But his swing still has a bunch of gaping holes in it, and his hand-eye coordination is okay, but if there's a balloon in the area, forget about it. So, we're still working on it, he'll. I'm going to be pushing for pre-K.
All right. Well, New York Dore, thank you for being generous with your time today. I'm glad we had some time to do this. This is just a fun time of year. I always enjoy this week so much. And you and I will do a few more of these in the coming weeks. We will talk about baseball next week, whether Vanderbilt's still playing or whether it's over, and we will absolutely do the draft podcast. So thank you for joining us.
Great.
He's New York Dore. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. More episodes coming later in the week.